Welcome back to Maggie Stories. Yuri can't control herself, and this time the whole market had something to say about it.
The thing about irrelevance was that it arrived quietly, and Cha Yuri had spent her entire life making noise specifically to keep it away. She had spent 3 weeks after the market confrontation doing what she always did when something didn't go her way. She restructured. She analyzed. She sat in her Hanamdong penthouse with the Han River spread out below her like a painting she owned, and she thought very carefully about what had gone wrong and why and what the correct next move was. The conclusions she arrived at were uncomfortable, but she was capable of uncomfortable when necessary. She had been too indirect. The compliance review too subtle, too easily defended. The confrontation at the market. She had gone in expecting a woman she could unsettle and found instead a woman who was structurally unsettle-proof. She had underestimated her twice. She would not do it a third time. What she needed was not another approach to Gomer. What she needed was Seojun directly, definitively, placed in a situation where the social architecture of his world did the work for her. Where the weight of family expectation and public perception made the decision easier than any individual choice. She called her mother. The Park and Cha families had overlapped for 20 years across boardrooms and ballrooms and the specific social calendar that old soul money kept like a religion. Mrs. Cha and Mrs. Park had lunched together quarterly, sat on the same charity board, and shared the particular bond of women who had navigated the same world for decades and understood each other's ambitions without needing to name them. Mrs. Cha made a lunch reservation. Mrs. Park accepted. Yuri did not attend. She didn't need to. She just needed her mother to mention, very casually, over the second course, that Seojun had been spending considerable time at a market stall in Mangwon. That it had become something of a talking point. That people were noticing. That it seemed. And Mrs. Cha would say this gently, with the warmth of genuine concern, a little unlike him. A little unlike what the Park family's heir should be doing with his time and his attention. She didn't need her mother to say anything directly actionable. She just needed the seed planted in the right soil. Mrs. Park was the right soil. Seojun found out about the lunch 3 days later. Not from his mother, she hadn't said anything to him yet, was likely still deciding how to raise it, which was her way. She gathered information first and deployed it carefully, a quality he had inherited and recognized. He found out because he had people whose job was to know things, and the things they knew included the movements of families whose daughters had been making specific kinds of trouble in specific kinds of locations. He sat with it for a day. Then he went to the market. Gomer was in the middle of a disagreement with her Wednesday delivery. Not a fight, she didn't do fights, but a very focused and detailed conversation with the delivery coordinator about the temperature consistency of the last 2 shipments. Conducted with the patience of a woman who had the documentation to back every single point and was prepared to use all of it. She finished the conversation, resolved it, actually, with a specific remediation plan and an adjusted delivery schedule, before she acknowledged him. "You look like something's on your mind," she said, signing the delivery clipboard. "Something is. Is it the kind of something that affects my market?" He considered this. "Potentially." She handed the clipboard back, turned to face him fully. "Tell me." He told her, concisely, factually, without editorializing, about the lunch, about what had been said, about what his mother had not yet said to him but would. He watched her face as he talked. It didn't change much. She listened the way she did everything, completely, with her full attention, which was one of the things about her that had gotten under his skin from the very beginning, the way she gave things her whole self or nothing. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So her next move," Gomer said slowly, "is your family." "Yes. She's trying to make you choose." "She's trying to make the choice for me," he corrected. "Through channels that don't require me to be directly asked." Gomer nodded, processing. "And your mother?" "Hasn't said anything yet. But she will. She will." Another pause. Gomer looked at her display case. Not blankly, she never did anything blankly, but with the focused interior expression of someone running calculations. "Seojun," she said. "Yes. I need you to understand something." She looked at him directly. "I like you." She said it the way she said everything. Straight, no decoration, like a fact that deserved the dignity of being stated plainly. "I'm not going to pretend I don't because we're past that and pretending would be insulting to both of us. But I will not be the reason you have a problem with your family. I won't carry that." "You wouldn't be the reason," he said. "She would." That's not how it would feel, Gomer said. And you know it. He did know it. That was the thing about her. She named things accurately, and accurate things were hard to argue with. Let me handle my family, he said. Seo Jun. Gomer. He said her name the same way she said his, like setting something down carefully. You handled the compliance review. You handled Yuri at your stall. You have handled every single thing that has come at you in this city for 6 years by yourself. A pause. Let me handle what's mine. She looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that 2 customers came and went and she served them without breaking the quality of her attention, which was its own kind of talent. Fine, she said finally. Fine. Don't make me repeat it. The corner of his mouth moved. She pointed at it. Don't, she said. I didn't do anything. Your face did something. He bought his pork. He left. Auntie Shin emerged from behind a hanging string of dried peppers where she had absolutely been standing for the last 10 minutes. I wasn't listening, she said. You were completely listening, Gomer said. He said he likes you, Auntie Shin said, with the energy of a woman delivering a verdict she had been waiting months to deliver. He said I like him, Gomer corrected. Same thing. Fundamentally different thing. Gomer SSI. Auntie Shin placed both hands on the counter. I have been married twice. I know what the same thing looks like when it's wearing different words. Gomer stared at her counter. Vegetables, she said, but quietly, and without her usual conviction. Auntie Shin smiled all the way back to her stall. What happened next was not something Yuri had planned. This was the problem with strategies built on social pressure through intermediaries. They moved slowly and you couldn't control the timing, and timing, as it turned out, was everything. Because while Mrs. Cha's lunch with Mrs. Park was still settling, while Mrs. Park was still deciding how to raise the topic with her son, while Yuri was in her penthouse believing she had finally found the correct lever, Park Seo-jun was having dinner with his mother on a Thursday evening and getting there first. He told her about the market, about the stall, about the 6 years and the license and the documentation binder and the compliance review that had found absolutely nothing because there was absolutely nothing to find. He told her about the way the market worked, about Auntie Shin, about Mr. Beck, about a woman who had built something real in a city that hadn't owed her anything and had done it without anyone's name behind her. Mrs. Park listened. She was a woman who had spent 40 years in a world that required her to read people quickly and accurately. And she listened to her son talk about this woman with the specific attention of a mother who was hearing something she had not heard before. You've never spoken about anyone like this, she said when he finished. No, he agreed. A pause. Yuri SSI. Is not a conversation I'm having, he said, gently, firmly, the same immovable gentleness he'd learned, without realizing he was learning it, from a woman in a burgundy apron. I'm telling you about someone who matters. That's the conversation. Mrs. Park looked at her son for a long moment. Then she picked up her tea. Bring her to dinner, she said. Properly. Not a market visit. Dinner. She'll roast us both, he said. Mrs. Park's expression shifted into something that might, on a different face, have been called a smile. Good, she said. This family could use it. Yuri found out about the dinner conversation 3 days later through the same network of information that had always kept her current, and she sat with it for a long time. He had gotten there first. He had told his mother himself. He had removed the lever before she could pull it, which meant he had known she was planning to pull it, which meant she had been more transparent than she'd believed, which was perhaps the most humiliating conclusion of all. She called Suyin. It's done, she said. Suyin, who had been waiting for this call for 2 months with the patience of a woman who loved her friend enough to stay quiet until the quiet became necessary, said, Are you all right? A long pause. I went to her stall, Yuri said. Did I tell you what she said to me? You told me some of it. She said. Yuri stopped, started again. She asked me whose world was small. Another pause. I've been thinking about that for weeks. I haven't been able to stop. Suyin said nothing. This was the right call. She built something, Yuri said. Genuinely. From nothing. And I've been trying to dismantle it because... She stopped again. The sentence had an ending she wasn't quite ready to say out loud. Because I was scared. Because he laughed at her stall in a way he never laughed at anything I arranged for him. Because she has something I don't know how to manufacture and I've been manufacturing things my whole life. Suyinya, she said. Yes. I think I need to do something different. A pause. With everything. Not just this. Suyin exhaled. Long and slow and relieved. Yes, she said. I think so too. She came to the market one final time. No Chanel. No structured dress. No armor. Just Yuri, cream slacks, a simple blouse, flat shoes that were finally, for the first time, appropriate for cobblestones. She looked like herself without the infrastructure, which turned out to be a different kind of beautiful. Quieter. More honest. Gomer saw her coming and went very still in the way she went still when she was paying full attention. Yuri came to the counter. She didn't perform anything. She just stood there. I'm picking up my mother's order, she said. It's ready, Gomer said. She reached under the counter and brought out the carefully packaged custom order. Wrapped exactly as specified. Labeled. Perfect. Yuri took it. She held it for a moment, then she looked up. She said you were right, Yuri said. Quietly. Without preamble. About whose world was small. She held Gomer's gaze. I'm not apologizing for the things I did because I think we both know what an apology from me is worth right now. But I wanted you to know that I heard you. Gomer looked at her. Read her face. The way she read everything, completely and without charity or cruelty. Just accurately. Your mother is going to love that order, she said. The cut I chose for the main course is exceptional. Tell her to rest it properly before she serves it. A beat. The corner of Yuri's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but something. I will, she said. She left. Flat shoes quiet on the cobblestones. No performance. No drama. Just a woman walking away from something she'd been holding too long. Auntie Shin appeared. Did she just? She started. She bought pork, Gomer said. Same as anyone else. Auntie Shin looked at her. Then at the retreating figure of Cha Yuri. Then back. You're something else, she said softly. Gomer was already back to work. But she was thinking good. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just good. The way you felt when something difficult resolved itself into something human. Good. The dinner invitation came on a Friday morning. Not a message, an actual invitation. A small card, cream-colored, handwritten, delivered to her stall by a courier who handed it over with the solemnity of someone who understood they were carrying something important. Gomer received it between customers, read it once, set it under the counter, served 4 more people, and then read it again during a natural lull because she believed in giving important things a second look when the noise died down. Dinner. Saturday. Not a market. Somewhere quiet. Just us. Seo Jun. She turned the card over. Nothing on the back. Just those words on the front, in handwriting that was precise and slightly compressed. The handwriting of a man who thought carefully before he committed anything to paper. Just us. She put the card back under the counter. Auntie Shin arrived at the stall 12 minutes later, which was either coincidence or the woman had developed a supernatural sensitivity to significant events in Gomer's vicinity. And at this point it was probably the second one. You look different, Auntie Shin said immediately. I look exactly the same. Your face is doing something. My face is neutral. Gomer SSI. Auntie Shin leaned on the counter. I have studied your face for 2 years. Neutral looks different. This is something. Gomer looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached under the counter and handed over the card. Auntie Shin read it. Read it again. Pressed it to her chest. Auntie, Gomer said. Give me a moment, Auntie Shin said. Eyes closed. I need the card back. 1 moment. Auntie Shin. I said 1 moment. Gomer SSI. I am experiencing something. Gomer waited. The market moved around them. Deliveries arriving, customers filing in. The fish vendor starting his morning calls. The whole warm machinery of it cranking into its daily rhythm. She waited until Auntie Shin opened her eyes and returned the card with the careful hands of someone returning. Something sacred. Say yes, Auntie Shin said. I haven't decided. You've decided. Auntie Shin straightened up. You decided the day he helped Mr. Beck with the grain sack without being asked. You just haven't said it out loud yet. Gomer looked at the card. Looked at the market around her, her market, her space, everything she'd built. Felt the familiar weight of it, which was not a burden, had never been a burden, was instead the specific satisfying heaviness of something real that you had made with your hands and your time and your refusal to quit. She thought about what it meant to let something new into a life you'd built to be complete on its own. She thought about a man who brought coffee in both hands and helped old men carry things and stood in her market 3 times a week absorbing the noise and the chaos and the humanity of it with the expression of someone who had found something they hadn't known they were looking for. She put the card in her apron pocket. "I have pork to dress," she said. Auntie Shin smiled. "Yes you do," she said. "Yes you do." She messaged him that evening. Short because she was a woman who said what she meant without excess. "Saturday is fine. You're choosing the place. And I'm choosing what I wear, so don't give me a dress code." His response came in 4 minutes, which she noted and did not comment on. "I wouldn't dare." She put her phone down, looked at her ceiling for a moment. Then she smiled. The whole one. The real one. In the privacy of her own apartment with nobody to see it and no performance required, and that was the best version of it. She had always thought, the smiles that belonged only to you. He chose a restaurant in Yeonam-dong. Small, privately owned, the kind of place that didn't have a sign outside and didn't need one because the people who knew about it told other people who knew about it, and that was sufficient. The chef was an older man who had been cooking for 40 years and approached each dish with the focused reverence of someone who understood that food was its own language and he was a translator. Gomer arrived in deep emerald, a dress that was structured at the shoulders and easy everywhere else, the kind of thing that looked effortless because she had spent 20 minutes deciding on it, which was the correct amount of time, not too little and not so much that you lost the plot. Her heels were gold. She had decided on gold specifically because emerald and gold together said something she wanted to say without words. Seo-jun was already there. He stood when she came in, not performatively, just naturally, the way someone stood when something worth standing for arrived. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her burgundy heels that day at the market, but whole, taking in the full picture with the expression of a man who had been thinking about this and found the reality better than the thinking. "Gold," he said. "Problem?" she said. "No," he said. "Absolutely not." They sat. The first 20 minutes were easy in the way that things were easy between people who had already done the hard work of knowing each other in an unguarded setting. They had talked across a market counter for months. Real talking, the kind where neither of them had been performing for the other, where she'd been working and he'd been just a man without his infrastructure and they'd found each other in that stripped-down space. The restaurant was different, but they weren't. She told him about Guyana. Not the summary version she gave people who asked casually, the real version. The way the market in Georgetown had smelled in the morning, the particular quality of light there that she had never found exactly replicated anywhere else. The grandmother who had taught her that the way you handled meat told you everything about a person's relationship with care. She said if you're careless with the preparation, Gomer said, turning her glass slowly, you're careless with the people you feed. And being careless with people is the one thing she didn't forgive. "She sounds formidable," Seo-jun said. "She was the most formidable person I've ever known." A pause. "Was. She passed 4 years ago." She said it evenly, the way you said things that had been grieved properly. Still present, no longer sharp. "I think she would have liked Seoul. She liked places that had their own personality. Places that argued back." "Seoul definitely argues back," he said. "So did she." The corner of her mouth. "I come by it honestly." He smiled, leaned back slightly. "When did you know you wanted to stay?" "In Korea." She thought about it genuinely, which she appreciated about him. He asked questions that deserved real answers and then waited for them. "About 8 months in," she said. "I had a terrible week. Supplier issue, licensing complication, a customer who tried to negotiate me down so aggressively I had to ask him to leave. I went home exhausted and I sat on my floor and I thought, I could leave. I could genuinely just leave." She paused. "And then I thought about the market the next morning. The smell of it. Auntie Shin hollering across the row. The way it felt to open my case and see everything exactly where I'd put it." She looked at the table. "I was on my floor for maybe 20 minutes. Then I got up, organized my supplier documentation, and went to bed." She looked up. "I haven't seriously considered leaving since." He was looking at her with that expression again. The one she had stopped trying to categorize because every category she put it in felt insufficient. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Seo-jun. I'm just," he paused. Chose words carefully, the way he always did, the compressed handwriting quality of his speech. "I've spent a lot of time in rooms with people who needed things from me. Information, decisions, money, access, presence. Every conversation had a shape to it, a thing it was moving toward. He looked at her steadily. You're the first person in a very long time who just talks to me. Without the shape. She was quiet for a moment. You came to my market, she said. A man like you in a coat like that standing at my chalkboard sign. You had a shape to your life too. Everything arranged around you. Pause. What were you actually looking for? He considered this with the seriousness it deserved. I don't know, he said. I think I needed to be somewhere that didn't know what I was. Where I was just a man who wanted good pork and got told his selection was spiritually defeated. She laughed. The real one. Surprised out of her, warm and full. You remember that? She said. That was the moment, he said simply. That was your moment? Me insulting a stranger's pork choices. You weren't insulting him, he said. You were holding a standard, completely unimpressed by anything except the quality of the thing itself. In my world he stopped. That's rare. That's actually rare. She looked at him across the small table in the quiet restaurant with the older chef moving in the background and the low light doing what good lighting did, which was tell the truth about faces, and she thought, this man has been lonely in the specific way that powerful people get lonely, which is surrounded and unseen, and he walked into my market and I saw him immediately and he knew it, and that was the whole thing from the very beginning. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Brief 2 seconds, 3, and then she picked up her glass. The pork here, she said, nodding toward the kitchen, is not as good as mine. He looked at his plate, back at her. It genuinely isn't. I know. Should I tell the chef? Absolutely not, she said. We're guests. We have manners. He laughed. She stored it, added it to the collection she was keeping in the part of herself that she had finally, quietly, decided to stop locking. After dinner they walked. Yeonam-dong at night was its own thing. The small streets, the independent shops with their warm windows, the particular soul nighttime energy that was busy without being loud. They walked without a destination, which was its own kind of statement between two people who had spent months finding reasons to be in the same location. She told him about the first time she'd broken down a full side of pork by herself, 17, her grandmother supervising from a chair with the energy of a woman who could have done it in half the time but understood that watching someone figure something out was its own form of teaching. He told her about the first time he'd sat in a boardroom meeting at 19, his father beside him, and understood for the first time the actual weight of what the family name meant. Not the power of it, which he'd grown up around, but the weight, the permanence of it, the way it preceded him into every room and would follow him out. Did you want it? She asked. The weight. I wanted to be worthy of it, he said. Those aren't the same thing. No, she agreed. They're not. They walked past a small shop with its lights still on. The owner visible through the window reorganizing a display with the focused contentment of someone who loved their work. Gomer watched for a moment as they passed. That's what I wanted, she said, gesturing slightly. That. Someone working in their own space, their own hours, their own rules. I didn't care about the scale of it. A pause. The million was just what happened when you did the work right and didn't let people talk you down on the price. He stopped walking. She went 2 steps further before she noticed and turned. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not the composed warmth of the market visits. Not the careful attention of the dinner table. Something more open than that. Something that had let go of the last controlled layer. What? She said. I want to tell you something, he said. Then tell me. I haven't been this, he stopped. Started again. I haven't felt like myself somewhere in a long time. And then I walked into your market and you called a stranger's pork choices spiritually defeated and I felt like myself immediately. And I've been coming back every week because leaving felt like losing something I'd only just found. The street was quiet around them. Somewhere nearby music from a bar floated past and was gone. Gomer looked at him. Read his face. Completely the way she always did, without charity or cruelty, just accurately. What she found there was the same thing she'd been finding for months and filing away in the section of herself she'd marked not yet. A man who was genuine. Specifically, particularly genuinely himself in her market, at her counter, in a restaurant in Yeonam-dong on a quiet street at night. The same person in all the locations. No performance. No shape. She took a step back toward him. Seo-jun, she said. Yes. You know I'm not easy, she said. I have opinions about everything. I will tell you when you're wrong. I don't change my schedule for anyone, and I take my work as seriously as I take anything else in my life. I know, he said. And you still. And I still, he confirmed. Quietly, without hesitation. She looked at him for one more moment. Then she linked her arm through his and started walking again. The pork at that restaurant, she said, was genuinely mediocre. I was being charitable. He made a sound that was mostly exhale and partly laugh. I'll tell him next time, he said. You absolutely will not. You're right, he said. I won't. They walked. The city moved around them. Seoul in all its nighttime personality, arguing back at the dark the way it always did, bright and loud and entirely itself. She thought, this is what it feels like when something fits without forcing. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't need to. Some things were true enough without being spoken. The market found out on a Tuesday. Not because anyone announced anything. Not because Gomer said a word or Seojun made a statement or anything deliberate happened. The market found out the way markets always found out about everything, through the accumulation of small observable details that individually meant nothing and collectively meant everything. Detail 1. Seojun arrived on Tuesday morning before the market was fully open, which he had never done before, carrying 2 coffees from the Yeonamdong roaster, and Gomer accepted hers without looking up from her opening setup, which meant she had been expecting it, which meant this was already a system. Detail 2. He stayed for an hour and a half. Not hovering, actually useful, helping her rearrange the back storage in a way she'd mentioned once, weeks ago, that she'd been meaning to get to. He did it correctly without being told how because she had described it once and he had listened and remembered, which was the kind of thing that told you everything about a person's intentions. Detail 3. When he finally left he said something quietly close to her that the surrounding stalls couldn't catch and she said something back, and neither of them was smiling in the big obvious way but both of them were smiling in the small real way which was louder than the big obvious way if you knew what you were looking at. Auntie Shin knew what she was looking at. She turned to Mr. Beck, who had appeared beside her with the uncanny timing of a man who had also been watching. Tuesday, she said. Tuesday, he confirmed. By noon the fish vendor knew. By 2 o'clock the tiak vendor knew. By closing time the parking attendant at the back entrance, who had technically never met either of them personally but had strong feelings about the whole situation, knew. The market had its verdict. The celebration planning began immediately. Gomer did not know about the celebration planning. She was aware, in the general way, that a woman aware of her environment was always aware, that the market's energy had shifted slightly in her direction, that there were more greetings than usual, more lingering at her counter, more of the specific warmth that communities generated when they were collectively pleased about something. But she attributed this to the clean compliance review result and the general goodwill of people who had been rooting for her, and she went about her week in the focused, purposeful way she went about everything. She and Seojun had settled into something that had the comfortable solidity of a thing that had been built properly from the foundation. He came to the market in the mornings when his schedule allowed. She went to him in the evenings sometimes, his apartment which turned out to be exactly what she'd expected and also nothing like she'd expected, minimalist in a way that was genuine rather than designed, with one wall of books that told her more about him than any conversation had, and a kitchen that was clearly underused but well-equipped, which she found both predictable and endearing. She cooked for him twice. The first time she made something from her grandmother's recipe and watched him eat it with the focused reverence of the Yeonamdong chef, and she thought, yes, alright, this person understands food as language, we're going to be fine. The second time he tried to help and she assigned him tasks with the clear efficient authority of a woman who ran a professional kitchen and did not lower her standards for company, and he followed instructions without ego, which was the correct response, and they ate at 10 o'clock at night at his kitchen counter because neither of them had noticed the time and that was also fine. That was actually perfect. He came to her apartment once and spent 40 minutes looking at her bookshelf with the expression of a man assembling a more complete picture of someone, asking about specific titles with genuine curiosity. She told him about each one. Not summaries, real things, what she'd gotten from them, what she'd argued with, what had stayed with her. He listened the way he always listened. Completely. At some point she realized they had been talking for 3 hours and it had felt like 20 minutes, and that was the thing about the right person. They didn't drain your time, they expanded it somehow, made it feel larger than it was. She told Auntie Shin none of this specifically. But Auntie Shin, operating on instinct and observation and 22 years of vegetable market intelligence, assembled the picture anyway. The celebration happened on a Saturday. Gomer arrived at the market at her usual time, early, before most of the other vendors, in the quiet of a morning that belonged only to the people who worked there. She unlocked her stall. She set up her display case. She arranged her knives. She straightened her apron. Deep violet today with heels to match, because she had felt like Violet and her feelings about color were non-negotiable. She turned around and found the entire adjacent row decorated. Not elaborately. The market was not an elaborate place and its people were not elaborate people. They were practical and genuine and they expressed things in practical, genuine ways. But there were flowers on the neighboring stalls, small bunches, the kind you bought from the flower vendor at the far entrance. There was a banner. Handwritten, slightly crooked, in both Korean and English, that read, "Congratulations, Gomer SSI. We knew first." There was a table that Auntie Shin had clearly organized, covered in food that various vendors had contributed. Rice cakes from the Tiok stall, kimchi from Mr. Beck, fish cakes from the fish vendor, and in the center, wrapped in the very specific packaging of her own stall, a beautifully prepared cut of pork that she recognized as one of her own premium pieces, which meant someone had purchased it from her inventory specifically, to give back to her as a gift, which was so circular and so genuinely them that she had to press her lips together for a moment. The vendors were assembled. All of them. Auntie Shin front and center, Mr. Beck beside her, the fish vendor and his wife, the Tiok vendor, the flower vendor, 3 of the Saturday regulars who had apparently been briefed and invited, and the parking attendant from the back entrance who had, as predicted, very strong feelings about this moment and was already visibly emotional. Gomer stood in front of all of it. "What?" she said. "Congratulations," Auntie Shin announced, with the energy of a woman who had been waiting months for a reason to do exactly this. "You decorated my market," Gomer said. "Our market," Auntie Shin corrected. "And yes, who authorized this?" "We took a vote," the fish vendor said. "When was the vote?" "Tuesday," Mr. Beck said. "After he rearranged your storage." Gomer looked at all of them. At the banner, slightly crooked, entirely sincere. At the flowers on the stalls. At the food on the table. At the premium cut wrapped in her own packaging sitting in the center like a trophy. "That's my pork," she said. "We bought it," the Tiok vendor said. "Full price. No discount. We know better than to ask for a discount," the fish vendor's wife added. Something was happening in Gomer's chest. Warm and inconvenient, and she was going to need a moment with it later in private, but right now she had a market to open and people looking at her with the specific expression of a community that loved someone and wanted them to know it, and she was not going to be undone by a slightly crooked banner and a piece of her own pork. She pressed both hands to her face briefly. Just briefly. "You are all," she said, from behind her hands. "Absolutely impossible." "Yes," Auntie Shin agreed. She lowered her hands, looked at all of them. "Did someone invite him to this?" A pause. Several people looked at Auntie Shin. "Possibly," Auntie Shin said. "Auntie Shin. He deserved to know the time. You invited She stopped, started again. "You invited Seo Jun to his own surprise market celebration." "It's your celebration," the fish vendor clarified. "He's just also invited." She opened her mouth, closed it. "That's not how surprises work. We're not a surprise family," Mr. Beck said sagely. "We're a community. Communities coordinate." Gomer looked at the sky briefly, then back at all of them. Then she laughed, the full one, the real one, the one that came up from somewhere deep and arrived before she could decide anything about it. And once she started she couldn't stop immediately, and the market laughed with her, and it was the best sound the row had produced in its entire history. Seo Jun arrived at 9:15. He came around the corner at his usual pace and stopped walking when he saw the banner. Read it once. Read it again. Looked at the assembled vendors. Looked at the food. Looked at the parking attendant who was now openly crying in a way that seemed disproportionate to his level of involvement in the situation. He looked at Gomer. She was leaning against her counter in violet, arms loosely crossed, with the expression of a woman who had been ambushed by her own community and had decided to be gracious about it. "Did you know about this?" he said. "I did not," she said. "We did," Auntie Shin announced. He looked at the banner again. "We knew first." He pressed his hand over his mouth for a moment. "Are you laughing?" Gomer said. "Absolutely not," he said, in the voice of a man who was absolutely laughing. "Come eat," Auntie Shin commanded. gesturing at the table with the authority of a woman who had organized this and intended to see it through to its full conclusion. He came. He ate rice cakes standing at the market table with fish vendors and a grain merchant and a woman in violet heels who handed him things with the ease of someone who had stopped pretending. This wasn't exactly where they both belonged. Mr. Beck told him at length about the history of the market, which Seo-jun listened to with complete attention, and Gomer watched him listen and thought, he does this everywhere. He gives people his whole attention and they feel it, and that's why the market claimed him. That's why they made a banner. The parking attendant composed himself enough to introduce himself properly. His name was Han Sol. He had been working the back entrance for 9 years. He shook Seo-jun's hand with both of his and said, with great seriousness, "You're a good man. I could tell from the way you parked." Seo-jun said, "I have a driver." Han Sol considered this. He parks well too, he decided. By midday the celebration had dissolved naturally back into the working market because these were working people and the mourning didn't stop for sentiment, which was the right way to do it. Mark the moment and then get back to the business of living. The flowers stayed on the stalls. The banner stayed up. The premium pork cut had been divided and shared, which Gomer had insisted on, and which had been consumed with the appropriate reverence. Seo-jun stayed. Not hovering, actually present, actually part of it. He helped Auntie Shin restock her display when a delivery came in. He held things for Mr. Beck. He learned the fish vendor's wife's name, Myung-suk, and used it correctly immediately, which made her smile for the rest of the afternoon. He stood at the edge of Gomer's stall during the busy period and stayed out of her way without being asked, which was the most important skill, and watched her work with the expression of someone watching something they genuinely admired. During a lull, she looked over at him. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I know," he said. "You have things. I rescheduled things." She looked at him. "You rescheduled things for a market Tuesday." "I rescheduled things for you," he said simply. "The market is where you are." "Same thing." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she reached under her counter and handed him a small wrapped package. Not her usual customer packaging, something simpler, clearly done this morning in the time before he arrived. He unwrapped it. Inside, a perfectly prepared cut, labeled in her handwriting with the preparation instructions, the resting time, the specific seasoning she used and had never written down for anyone. He looked at it, looked at her. "Family recipe," she said. "Trade secret." A pause. "Yours now." He went very still. "Don't make it weird," she said. "I'm not making it weird. Your face is making it weird." "My face is," he stopped. "Gomer. Seo-jun." "Thank you," he said. Just that. Without decoration. The compressed handwriting quality of a man who meant things exactly as he said them and trusted that to be enough. It was enough. It was more than enough. "You're welcome," she said. "Now let me work." He stepped back. Let her work. Stayed in her periphery like he'd always been there, which she was willing to admit now, fully without qualification. Felt exactly right. The market closed at 6. The other vendors packed down their stalls in the familiar end-of-day rhythm. The specific sounds of it, the rolling of carts, the lowering of shutters, the calling of goodbyes across the row. Auntie Shin was the last to leave as always. She stopped at Gomer's stall on her way out, looked at the two of them. Gomer wiping down her counter, Seo-jun folding the last of the packaging material because he had learned where it went, and put her hand briefly on Gomer's arm. "Your grandmother," she said quietly, "built something in you that holds." Gomer looked at her. "I think she'd be pleased," Auntie Shin said simply. She left before Gomer could respond, which was either thoughtfulness or strategy and was probably both. Her cart wheels complained against the cobblestones, fading down the row, and then the market was quiet in the particular way. It was quiet at closing. Not empty, just resting, the way living things rested between their efforts. Gomer stood at her clean counter. She thought about her grandmother in her chair, supervising with the authority of a woman who understood that watching someone figure something out was its own form of teaching. She thought about a floor in a small apartment 8 months into a life in a country that hadn't owed her anything, and getting up off it. She thought about a binder of documentation that had defeated a compliance review. She thought about a chalkboard sign and a man in an expensive coat reading it twice. She thought about everything she'd built. How it had started with a decision and a skill and a standard she had never once lowered for convenience. how it had always been enough, how it was still enough, how enough could also, it turned out, have room in it. Seo Jun came to stand beside her at the counter. Not in front of it, beside it, on her side, which was new and right. He looked out at the closed market the way she was looking at it. Same time tomorrow, he said. She looked at her market, her knives in their right places, her display case empty and gleaming, ready for tomorrow's cuts. Her chalkboard sign, Gomer's Cuts, finest pork in Seoul. Don't argue with me about the price. You will lose. Catching the last of the evening light, she untied her apron, folded it over the counter the way she always did. Violet, perfectly pressed. Hers. I'm here every day, she said. He smiled. The real one. The whole one. She picked up her bag. He held the stall gate while she locked it. Not taking over, just present, just there. And they walked out of the market together into the early evening, Seoul doing what Seoul did, bright and loud and entirely itself, arguing back at the dark the way it always had. Behind them, on the stall gate, the banner shifted slightly in the evening breeze. We knew first. It was slightly crooked. It was perfect.
Hello besties, in this story we learned that a woman who builds with integrity never has to choose between her empire and her peace. The right person adds to what she built without ever touching what makes it hers. Besties, build so completely that love becomes an addition and never a condition. The right person will stand beside your work and respect it before they reach for your heart. You should never have to shrink your world to fit into someone else. When it is right, it expands yours. And the community that watch you build will always know before you do, because they saw you when you didn't think anyone was looking. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.